to know you a little bit better. When did you join?
So April of 1988, joined. I was enlisted for 4 years out here, did the typical join, get your college paid for through GI Bill, went to the University of Maine, and then through that process decided to apply for a pilot training slot. Got that in my senior year at Maine, and went to pilot training, got commissioned, went to pilot training. And so in 1992 I left for pilot training, came back in December of 93, and then I've been here as a flyer, working different jobs throughout the wing ever since.
Wow. So why the Air Force?
Maybe a little bit of family tradition, not necessarily the Air Force, but the Maine Air Guard. My father was a member of the Maine Air Guard for 34 years. He started enlisted back in the 1950s and kind of followed the same route I did, or maybe I followed the same route he did is the right way to say that. He was enlisted on the flight line, went to officer school, became a navigator or a weapons system officer on the fighter aircraft we had back then. So I grew up being the son of a maniac, and came out here and wandered around the base, got to sit in cockpits during family days and things like that. So probably just carrying on with the family tradition.
That's sweet. Very, very sweet. Take me back to September 11th, 2001.
September 11th, 2001. That was the day after our drill weekend for that September. We had just had a major exercise here on base, and I happened to be in our communications flight in a classroom, taking a class at the time, and the PA kept going off, calling people out of the class, and 3 or 4 people had left, and then my name was called. I was the chief of scheduling at the time, chief of aircrew scheduling, and I got called to report back to my office. And when I got into the office, somebody had the TV on, and I looked up, and it was the towers burning. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, this exercise is really kind of robust. They're really going all out, because I thought it was closed circuit TV, and it was, you know, some image they'd put up trying to finish out the exercise. And then a few minutes later I realized that was live, and you know, the towers had been hit, and we'd been attacked on our own soil. So right after that we started generating aircraft. We had a couple of airplanes already airborne for training missions that day, that were pressed into service right over New York and along the eastern seaboard. We generated 3 more aircraft, got them ready for immediate takeoff with full fuel loads. And I was on the 3rd jet that we generated that day. The first aircraft took off almost immediately. The second one waited another hour or so before it took off. And if I remember right, our crew waited probably about 3 hours before we actually took off. While we were waiting, this was back, you know, 2001, cell phones and social media probably wasn't quite as big back then, so we were sitting in the airplane, really didn't know what was going on. So our crew chief, you know, our ground maintenance person that was getting us ready to launch, would sit in his truck with the radio on and key the mic so that we could hear news reports. And after a couple of hours of just kind of sitting and waiting, we got the call to come back into operations and trade out our communications stuff and essentially go from peacetime communications to wartime. And that, you know, when that's happening on U.S. soil, that's kind of a sobering moment. And as we were doing that, we got the call to launch, and that started our day.
So you went off on the third. So as you're waiting, what's going through your mind? Do you remember?
Stunned, but really just doing our job. I mean, so you take what the emotions and so forth you've got a job to do, and now we're talking about defending our homeland at that point. So I think we mostly just kind of put that emotion in a box, set it aside, so that we could concentrate on our job at that point. And I think for most of us it took months, if not years, to actually unbox those emotions and deal with them over time. It's what we do. It's what we're trained to do and how we operate. So.
Can you describe to me what it, as you're flying, for people who haven't seen what that's like, what was it like that day? Can you?
Surreal. So normally flying is a very regimented thing. Air traffic control in the United States is very exact and precise, and there's lots of things that you have to do to get airborne. So we started engines that day, and we were ready to taxi, and we normally request clearance to taxi, request clearance to take off, and you go through a series of different steps to get airborne. And when we called for taxi clearance that day, the tower responded with cleared to taxi on any taxiway, cleared for immediate takeoff. Huh, okay. And I looked at the other pilot, and we taxied, and we got down towards the active runway, and we requested clearance to take off because that's what we always do. And tower came back with a slightly annoyed tone saying, "You're cleared any taxi, any runway, cleared for immediate takeoff and contact tactical." And I looked at the other pilot again and I said, "Did they just say what I think they said?" "Yep." Which essentially meant we were cleared to do whatever we needed to do, and we were cleared to immediately talk to our tactical controller. I think, again, at that point, it got real. Throughout the day, there were these kind of epiphanies that, wow, things have changed, and how we do business now is different. We took off, contacted the local ground control intercept radar, the military radar controller, and they directed us towards Boston. And we set up an orbit between Boston and Providence, and we proceeded to refuel the fighter team that was working the Boston airport. Again, when you're refueling armed fighters over the United States, that's something we've never had to do before, and it was a little bit sobering with the realization that we were flying armed patrols over our own country.
Sorry, it's emotional too. What did it? I don't know how to say it any other way than what was? If you could capture the emotion that everybody was feeling in that moment, what do you think it would be to really put it in perspective for people who are going to see this?
It's hard to put into words. There's surprise, there's fear, there's anger. There's a whole host of emotions that come with it. The Maniacs, the 101st, the Maine Air National Guard, we're a professional organization. We've always strived to be the best at what we do. And that day, the figures escape me now 20 years later, but it was well over 95% recall within a few hours. In other words, 95% of the base population reported to work. Some without even getting a phone call asking them to come in. They just grabbed their uniforms and came in. From all parts of the state and throughout the country. We had people that were driving back to the base to get back to work. So really that sense of duty is probably the pervading thing. The fact that somebody had come and attacked us in our own homeland, and that desire to defend the homeland and make sure that it wasn't going to happen again. I'd say that was the overall feeling and concern.
Can you, and I don't know how much of this you can share or not, but can you describe kind of what your job was as far as once you got down and with refueling? What does that look like to somebody who's never seen that before?
So you're asking about how we actually refuel and
Yeah.
Okay. As I said, we were set up supporting the fighters that were overwatch for Boston Logan. So there was 2 fighters, F-15s from then Otis, the 102nd. That unit has shut down as a fighter unit. Those planes have moved now to Barnes. But at the time they were out of Otis. And 2 fighters and a tanker work as a team in a combat air patrol, a CAP we call it, CAP. And we would have 1 fighter that would be down monitoring all of the action, all of the civilian airliners coming into Boston Logan, and then another fighter would be up taking gas from us, and they would swap. And in that way we would keep them fueled and able to do their mission, and we help them with command and control when they're down low. Sometimes the fighters can't actually talk to their controllers, and so we'll relay information back and forth. It's again something we'd trained for all our careers. At that point I was about 7 years in the air refueling job, an aircraft commander and instructor pilot, so pretty well experienced in how to do the job, and we're just going to work. Our focus was mission oriented and do our job.
Your job. That's simplified a little bit. I think. I'm guessing it probably still makes you emotional now.
Yeah, a little bit.
Can you tell me why?
Probably being right there at the turning point of what the new normal becomes. I mean, before that, air travel was kind of laissez-faire and carefree, and now you have all of the screening that you have to do and things like that. Before that, I think we maybe had a notion that we were somewhat untouchable, and to have an adversary bring the fight to the homeland, that's a little sobering. So it kind of changed everything. It certainly changed the face of the Maine Air Guard. Before that, we were kind of a strategic reserve. We'd be called when some major war happened. And now we've kind of changed gears and we're in the fight day to day. We have people deployed quite frequently to places all over the world, helping our allies and defending the homeland too.
What comes up for you every year on the day?
Honestly, it usually sneaks up on me. When September drill comes around, we're busy getting ready for the unit training period, and then all of a sudden I realize, wow, it's coming up on September 11th, and usually around the time that we took off that day, I'll stop for a moment and quietly reflect on the past years and that day. It's kind of it's my own personal tribute, my own personal remembrance, and it's time to move on and get back to work. And again, I think that's part of our Maniac tradition is we're here to get the job done, and so dwelling too long on something doesn't get the job done, so we go back to work.
put around the words that I want to use here, because it feels like you guys went from literally training for something like this, and in an instant, to fighting the fight.
Sure. So if you look back in my career, a 33-year career at this point, I started in the Cold War era, where our adversary was the Soviet Union, and we were fighting that Cold War. Then Desert Storm happened, and I was in maintenance at the time, and we would get phone calls saying, hey, we need a maintainer to go to overseas, and anybody volunteer. I'd raise my hand, yeah, sure, I can go. I'd go home, pack my bags, come back to work only to find that some other unit had volunteered for it. And I'd probably packed my bags 4 or 5 times to deploy overseas for Desert Storm, and actually never went. But that was a turning point. The Guard started to become a little bit more involved in operational stuff at that point. We worked, deployed for no-fly zones in Bosnia and Iraq, supporting those efforts. Then 9/11 happens, and we really get into the Homeland Defense mission. On September 12th, we had a number of crews and aircraft ready to launch at a moment's notice in case something else happened. And we have changed that number of crews and airplanes on alert quite a bit in the coming years, but we're still in that Homeland Defense posture, ready to go if we need to. And then we've deployed overseas countless times. I look back and most of our air crews and maintainers have deployed a half dozen times or more. Our expeditionary combat support folks, those are our security forces defenders, our services people, civil engineers and that kind of stuff. Those folks have deployed numerous times as well. So we went from, as you say, being a kind of an organization that trains to be ready, to an organization that's deploying on a fairly regular basis, and supporting whatever mission comes up. We had on September 12th or 13th an active duty squadron rolled in here of KC-135s, and we worked hand in hand with them for about a month and a half, and they got the call to forward deploy closer to the fight, and we picked up all of the requirements at that point, all of the alerts and all of the refueling missions that were going on. So we started a sprint about mid-September 2001, and the sprint kind of turned into a marathon, and I don't know that the marathon's really finished yet. We've stayed busy.
What keeps you going?
The mission. It's that feeling that we're doing something that matters. I say that Homeland Defense mission. I mean, what greater mission is there but defending your homeland, defending your relatives, your friends, your community? That and the people out here. I think as I look back on 33 years of being out here, worked with some tremendous people, and so there's a little bit of pride there in not wanting to let them down. So we keep doing what we do.
I'm sorry to keep jumping back and forth, but I just thought of this. The moment that it came to reality that this was a terrorist attack, where were you?
I was literally in my office. I was the chief of aircrew scheduling at the time, and as I said, I was watching it, what I thought was a closed circuit TV, take for the exercise that we just concluded over the weekend, and it took somebody telling me that the towers had been hit probably 2 or 3 times for me to really shift gears and realize that now that what I'm seeing on the TV and what I'm hearing is not part of the exercise, it's real. And as I said, at that point, we went into work mode. You know, we knew that terrorists had used airplanes as weapons, civilian airliners. So we immediately started putting our aircraft into a mission-ready status. You know, we generate them so that they have plenty of fuel on them. Air crews pre-flighting them so they're ready to go. We didn't know what would come next, but we knew we wanted to be ready in case we were needed. So, you know, again, it's that military training that you kind of put aside what's going on externally, and you focus on what your mission is, and that's what we're good at.
Do you have any questions?
I'm good.
You mentioned that you felt like you had a box of emotion. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, what that felt like.
So I guess early on in your career, you learn to put stuff aside because the mission comes first, and you don't always have time to process emotions or feelings or what's running through your head. So you aircrew members talk about putting stuff in that box and putting the box on a shelf and coming back to it later. We're really good at it. As a matter of fact, my family has grown to become accustomed to it, and they tell me that I need to go back and visit my shelf every once in a while. Like I said, I'm not sure when I really unboxed those feelings. We started the sprint that turned into a marathon shortly after 9/11, and I remember the days were long in the scheduling office, managing missions and things like that, 12, 16-hour days. We didn't have enough crew members to do everything we were doing, so people that worked office jobs also flew on the schedule. You know, we'd get just enough crew rest to be able to fly. And then I remember my folks have a house 5 minutes away. Rather than drive all the way out to Glenburn to take a nap, I didn't want to waste that 15 minutes of sleep that I could get. I would go over to my folks' house, and my mother would find me crashed on the living room couch. And you know, she'd kind of wrestle me awake and say, how much time do you have? And I'd say, well, I need to be back to work at 7. All right, you've got 2 more hours. I'll wake you in time. So it took quite a while before we could slow down and really think about it. And I think probably a lot of the emotions kind of dulled over time because we were continually just doing our jobs. Every once in a while, something will happen that reminds me of that day. And it, I don't know if takes my breath away is the right answer, but it causes me to stop. And like I said, I usually will take that silent moment alone to think about all the friends that have had their lives changed and affected, all the people I know, kind of reflect on it, and I guess that gives me a sense of purpose again for why we're here and doing what we do.
You mentioned do you remember what time you took off?
Sometime afternoon. I usually will remember before about 1 o'clock that this is about that time that we launched. I do have a special place in my logbook where it's that page of my logbook is very dog-eared because I do turn back to it to look at what I'd written down. a lot of unique things happened on that day as far as aviation goes. And it's sometimes a little challenging to reflect back on it.
Is there anything that I didn't ask about that you were hoping to talk about, or is there anything that people that watch this special, and as they remember, anything that you want them to think about?
I don't have my flight suit on today. I'm wearing my ground uniform, but I have a patch that I've worn since the first anniversary, and it says "Never Forget." And so that's what I think I would ask folks is never forget what happened that day. Never forget what our service members have done for the nation in the last 20 years and will continue to do. Take that opportunity to thank them. Most of us are humble and don't really want the thanks, but it still means something when somebody says that. That's what I would hope for on the 20th anniversary.
Thank you.
Thanks.
A lot. A lot. Anything else, you guys? I'm like literally crying now. I'm so sorry.
I apologize if you make you repeat yourself a little bit, but I imagine as a pilot, you haven't really experienced anything like that since, especially over America.
Yeah, not here in the States. And I flew probably 25, 30 combat air patrols here in the United States after that. And those were all designed just to kind of protect the major cities here in the United States, in the months after 9/11. But we were never that on edge. We were never that close, in a sense, and that's a good thing. I don't know if our adversaries saw what we were doing and knew that we were ready, or they just weren't ready to take another swing at us. But either way, it hasn't happened since, so that's a good thing.
Do you have photos of you in your other suit with the patch, by any chance? If we wanted to show that, or do you have any?
I probably don't. So I wear that patch. There's a pen pocket over on this side of your flight suit that has a flap that comes over it, and it's tucked nicely under that patch, under that flap. So it's really there for me more than anyone else. But I don't know when your special is airing, but I'm sure we could get Sergeant Sinclair to get a picture of it if you wanted.
It's gonna be that night at 7.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Awesome. Just to have that.
Yeah, Andy's shaking his head, so
Okay.
we're good.
Okay. I'm gonna grab tissues really quick because I knew that I was gonna cry, but I didn't think it'd be this soon. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I can't think of anything else. You hit everything. I just can't thank you enough for like making the time to chat with us.
Well, I'm honored to chat with you. There's many of us that have been right at the edge of the global war on terror and the Homeland Defense Mission, and I hope that I've done all those that went before me and all those that are still serving some justice in talking about it today.